Welcome to Fearless with Jason Whitlock. I am Jason Whitlock, your host. I'm a bit unshaven, but I am prepared to deliver an awesome show on this Monday morning. I hope you are prepared for where we're going to go today. We're going to start talking about Mike Wilbon's interview with Bobby Burack and OutKick. We're going to pivot into a discussion about the NCAA tournament and 4 number 1 seeds advancing to the Final Four. And we could end up in the women's bracket with 3 number 1 seeds. I don't think USC, without Juju Watkins, is going to make the Final Four. I don't think they can beat UConn without the best player in college basketball. And so a number 2 seed, but it's all chalk all over this NCAA tournament, both men's and women's. I'm going to tell you why I don't like it and why it's all a byproduct of name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal and how they've just destroyed college basketball. We'll also talk about the Pistons-Timberwolves Brawl from last night. Is this a big deal, little deal, or no deal? And Deion Sanders got a brand spanking new contract. We will discuss that as well. And then Shemeka Michelle will come on. We'll talk about Jasmine Crockett and Byron Donalds, who Jasmine Crockett has a problem with Byron Donalds' white wife. We'll talk about that with Shemeka Michelle. And then after Shemeka Michelle, don't go anywhere. I'm going to end the show with some interesting thoughts on Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers and their accomplishment of making it to the Final Four. An amazing show. I got a lot to get off my chest. Steve Kim will join me. Shemeka Michelle will join me. And at the beginning and end of the show, it'll just be you and me, because I got a lot to say. Before I get into my fire starter on this Michael Wilbon interview, you guys know Michael Wilbon from Pardon the Interruption, one of the greatest sports journalists of the last 30, 40 years. Before I get to that, I want to talk with you guys about my latest discovery that I get to share with you that, as you've heard me mention perhaps before, I wish Glenn Beck had shared it with me. But see, this is why I'm just a nicer guy. I'm just more generous than Glenn Beck. And Glenn Beck is very, very generous. But nobody looks out for their audience the way that I do. And so Glenn Beck founded a company, Real Estate Agents I Trust. And it can simplify your home buying and home selling experience. You've listened to me say, and I'm saying this often, I'm a tiny bit upset with Glenn Beck, because if he had told me about this company when I started buying this new home here in Tennessee, I could have quickened the process of discovering and finding a real estate agent that I could trust, and I eventually did. But the process would have been a lot easier had I known about Real Estate Agents I Trust. They pair you with top-selling real estate agents in your area. This is someone who knows the best practices, someone who understands the crazy housing market, someone who's a team leader and a closer, someone you can trust. If you're thinking about buying or selling a home or both, please get in touch with them. You'll see what I mean. Real Estate Agents I Trust, the name says it all. Go to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. You don't have to do any thinking. The name tells you everything you need to know. And anybody that's bought a home, knows anything about buying a home, knows anything about selling a home, knows you need a real estate agent you can trust. Glenn Beck's got it on lock. This is anywhere in the country. Check them out. All right, let's get into today's show. Let's get into, and I want to apologize for saying this and dragging myself into this a little bit, but I have to keep it real. I have to be honest with you. I have to be transparent, even when, it looks like I'm beating my chest. I'm really not. But Mike Wilbon did an interview with Bobby Burack at OutKick. Bobby Burack, many of you may not recognize the name, but if you follow sports media, you recognize the name. He's been the guy for the last 4 or 5 years that has covered the media, particularly the sports media. He used to do a bit more coverage of the political media as well. Seems like he's leaned a little bit out of that, inched away from that, and now focuses most of his attention on the sports media. And he's pretty infamous in ESPN circles because Bobby keeps it real, all the way real. I don't really know Bobby's politics, but I think most people would say, like, Bobby's MAGA. And ESPN is not MAGA. ESPN is left wing, and most ESPN broadcasters can't stand Bobby Burack. So the fact that Mike Wilbon would even take Bobby Burack's call, let alone do an on-the-record interview with Bobby, is fascinating and bold and shocking, quite honestly. When I saw Bobby tweet this out, I was like, man, Wilbon talking to Bobby Burack? That is significant, very significant. And I read the interview, and it reminded me of the interview I did in 2006 with The Big Lead. And you guys remember and know Jason McIntyre. He's Colin Cowherd's sidekick on FS1 on The Herd. Jason McIntyre founded The Big Lead years ago. And Jason McIntyre, and I apologize, but I'm just keeping it real. Jason McIntyre loves to pretend like, hey, Colin Cowherd put The Big Lead on the map when he mentioned us on Colin's radio show and the website crashed, and that's what made The Big Lead. Because now Jason McIntyre doesn't like me, but back in the day, me and Jason McIntyre got along quite well. And I did an interview on The Big Lead in 2006 that melted the internet and melted sports media and put The Big Lead on the map. And it was me talking about the phoniness and the corrosion and the corruption and the fall of the mainstream sports media. And I attacked in that interview, I called out Mike Lupica, and I called out a guy, Scoop Jackson, that used to work at ESPN, who was a no-talent hack, who ESPN had anointed as some sort of replacement for Ralph Wiley, and it offended me. And I said something about Scoop Jackson's ghetto shtick and how harmful it was, and just, it was all coming from a point of view of, like, Ralph Wiley was a friend of mine, was a giant in the sports media industry, and was someone who was super talented, wrote books, wrote for Sports Illustrated. And ESPN has decided that Scoop Jackson, who legitimately wrote at a 6th or 7th grade level, and his thoughts were at a 7th or 8th grade level. And I'm like, you're replacing Ralph Wiley with Scoop Jackson? Guy that wrote bad hagiographies for Slam magazine? A guy who thinks and articulates his thoughts like a child? Someone with literally horrendous writing skills. And I was like, this is ESPN, the worldwide leader. They have their pick. And many people will sit there and say, oh, Jason, you're just mad they didn't pick you. And that, let me just say, there may have been a kernel of truth in that, in the fact that in terms of accomplishments, talent, putting the work in, being an actual journalist, me and Scoop Jackson are on two different planets. And I was writing for Page Two, and Page Two was treating me like I was some clown, that they were doing a favor by publishing me, and then they go and hire an actual clown. And I was like, this is a bad sign for the media. If ESPN, the worldwide leader, is going to replace Ralph Wiley with someone with this little talent and this little intellect, what are they doing? And so I pointed that out. People got upset with me. They didn't care that I took a dump on Mike Lupica and his phoniness. It was like, oh, how dare you, Jason? You picked on Scoop Jackson. He's black. Don't you realize you can't do that? You can't call out ESPN for using DEI to promote a clown. That's anti-black. You should just shut your mouth and let them make the face of sports journalism as it relates to black sports writers. Let them make it Scoop Jackson. Well, anyway, I did that. For those of you that aren't old enough to remember, you can look it up. The article, the interview is actually on the website, still on the internet. You can find it for yourself. Anyway, what Wilbon just did here with Bobby Burack is cut from the exact same cloth. Now, he did it in an indirect way. He did it in a more polite way. But anybody reading this with a clear mind and an objective point of view, and I'll give you some context to me and Wilbon here in a second. But my read from afar is that Mike Wilbon has basically said they gave Stephen A. Smith not just a $100 million contract and have made him the clear-cut head and shoulders above everybody and anybody, the face of ESPN, but now they're letting this dude run for president of the United States of America while collecting $20 million a year from ESPN. And Mike Wilbon has said to himself, like, what am I, chopped liver? Well, I've been, as it relates to print journalism and my career at the Washington Post and all that I accomplished at the Washington Post, are you kidding me? ESPN has looked at this and said, Stephen A. is the face of sports media here at ESPN? And then he goes, we've been doing Pardon the Interruption for 20 plus years. Look at our ratings, look at our impact. All of these shows are based on Pardon the Interruption, what Tony Kornheiser and I have accomplished at Pardon the Interruption. And ESPN has pretended for the last 15 years that First Take and all the trolling they do at First Take is like this person, Stephen A. Smith. Now, if we went print journalism for print journalism, I'm head and shoulders above Stephen A. Smith. If we go television career, outreach to audience, TV ratings, I'm head and shoulders above ESPN. Above Stephen A. Smith. But they've created some world through the Matrix where they've lied and pretended like Pardon the Interruption and what me and Tony Kornheiser have accomplished pales in comparison to Stephen A. Smith, First Take, and Skip Bayless, and now Shannon Sharpe. And Wilbon has reached the conclusion that I have, like, hey, this is an intentional promotion of the clown show. It's fine. You want to pay Stephen A. Smith all that money. But now I have to sit here as ESPN, as Disney, pretends like this guy should be the president of the United States of America. There's only so much insanity that an intelligent, objective person can withstand. without snapping. And so Wilbon never directly goes at Stephen A. Smith, or when he goes at him lightly. But he's finally reached his breaking point, his boiling point of like, what are we doing here? There's clown shows and clown cars everywhere, and they're all getting major paydays. They're all being promoted as the face of ESPN and the future of ESPN. And Wilbon would never say this because he's too polite, too classy, married, kids. He doesn't need the headaches that I invite and take on. He doesn't need it. And I'm telling you, I would, if I had a wife and kids, I'd probably be making the same decisions as Mike Wilbon. I would be picking and choosing my fights more cautiously. But in my view, Wilbon it goes beyond Stephen A. Smith. He looks around ESPN and he sees all of these women everywhere. And ask, what are they contributing to the conversation? And why are they getting paid like they're doing what me and Tony have been doing for 20 plus years? Why is Mina Kimes being thrown out here as some kind of football expert? Why is L. Duncan and the whole little, and I actually like this show for the most part. The three women they got on the studio show promoting college basketball, that makes sense to me. Halfway like it. But holy cow, are they over the top with their narcissism and hey, look at me and we're special and the whole Black Queens deal. And at the end of the day, what do they really offer to the conversation other than a bad attitude and a victim mentality? And so Wilbon's reached his breaking point and he says, you know what? I'm going to do an interview with Bobby Burack and OutKick. I'm going to go where I'm not supposed to go. And so even though his words aren't as direct and as controversial as my interview in 2006, just the fact that he's talking to Bobby Burack and allowing this conversation to be had on OutKick, that is every bit as controversial and every bit as bold as what I did talking to the Big Lead and Jason McIntyre, because the Big Lead and Jason McIntyre weren't controversial. They weren't hated by any portion of the sports media the way OutKick and Bobby Burack are. What Wilbon did here is a wonderful Wilbon. I love that these guys, a lot of times I assist on these turns of phrases, but holy cow, you guys have knocked yourself out today. That is tremendous because we are living in the aftermath of a Wilbon. And I want to read to you some of these excerpts from Michael Wilbon. But before I do that, I'm about to share with you all the excerpts from Wilbon's interview and why I think they're amazing and controversial and right in line with what I was saying was going to be the future in 2006. And I don't say that at all to diminish Mike Wilbon and say, hey, look, I was saying this 18 years ago or 19 years ago. What took you so? I'm not doing that. I'm just applauding Mike Wilbon for being this bold and this courageous and for granting Bobby Burack this interview. Before I do that, guys, I want to talk to you about relief factor. And I think I shared with you all last week that at my home studio, Jeffrey Steele and I, Jeffrey Steele, the legend at the Hall of Fame. He's in the Country Music Hall of Fame, songwriter, singer, performer, great friend of mine, just another one of these people here in Nashville that I've picked up as friends and as brothers. He's at my home and we're taping the first episode of Bring Your Own Guitar, and he whips out his little packet of Relief Factor. And he's like, hey, you know what these are? And I go, of course I know what these are. That's Relief Factor. You in my stash? I mean, I said, I didn't remember. It's like I thought he went into my kitchen where I keep my Relief Factor by the refrigerator. So you in my stash? What are you doing? He goes, no, man, I've been taking this for a while. A friend of mine had knee surgery, I think maybe knee replacement surgery, and nothing that they did could relieve the pain for his friend until he started taking Relief Factor. And then he said that got Jeff started taking Relief Factor. And Jeff is in his early 60s, and Jeff bikes 30 miles a day. It's amazing. 30 miles a day in his early 60s. And he said the only thing that relieves his aches and pains is Relief Factor. And so when Jeffrey Steele and Jason Whitlock are doing the exact same things so that they can continue to work out and continue to enjoy life and not surrender to, oh, I'm just too old, I can't do this, I can't do that anymore, I can't go on those long walks, you don't have to live a compromised life. Relief Factor, it's a daily supplement that helps your body fight pain by fighting inflammation, which is the source of most pain in our bodies. It's 100% drug-free. It's developed by doctors to help reduce or eliminate pain. More than 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start, which is less than $1 a day. The 3-week quick start is just $20. For $20, guys and gals, you have a shot at relieving the aches and pains that are preventing you from enjoying life. It's just $20. $20 will fall out of your pocket today, and some of you will think about, is it worth the effort to bend over and pick up that $20, or should I just keep it moving? That 20 could get you some Relief Factor and get you the relief you've been searching for and get you back in the game in a way that you thought was impossible. Call 1-800-4RELIEF. That's 1-800-4-RELIEF. Or visit relieffactor.com. All right, let me get into Michael Wilbon's comments in this Big Lead interview. And you know, I'll unpack this, then we'll bring Steve Kim on, we'll discuss it, and then we'll discuss some of these other things going on in the sports world. Take another little pinch of coffee here. Here's the first thing that Wilbon picked up on, that a lot of us picked up on in the Stephen A. Smith, LeBron James feud, and LeBron James going on Pat McAfee's show and taking an unprovoked shot, an unnecessary shot at Brian Windhorst. Windhorst is one of the great reporters, nice guys. Look, I don't want to get Windhorst in a bunch of trouble at ESPN, but I love Brian Windhorst. Brian, I'm sorry if that caused you a bunch of headaches and those leftist crazies at ESPN now look at you with a side eye, but I just got to keep it real. I've never had a single bad experience with Brian Windhorst. Always nothing but respect for the way he's conducted himself and the way he's handled himself as a journalist. And LeBron James just out of nowhere takes a shot at him and calls him a weirdo and that pretends like Windhorst is running around pretending he's LeBron James' best friend. It bothered Wilbon as well. So here was Wilbon's comments to Bobby Burack as it relates to LeBron James in that interview. The Windhorst comments that he pretends to be LeBron's best friend is weird. I've been around LeBron when people have asked him about something that happened 2 decades ago in Ohio, and he would respond by saying, I don't even remember that. Ask Wendy. Wendy will know. That tells me he has respect for Windhorst that is undeniable. I know he respects Windhorst, so why say this now? As for his issues with Stephen A., he and Stephen A. are both big boys. They can go at it. I refuse to even consume their beef. People are calling me and asking me about it. My son asked me about it, and I told him I didn't care. There's too much ego involved on both sides of it. I don't give a damn about the BS, bull, you know what, but the Windhorst comments bother me. Brian is in a tough spot. He takes his job seriously. Brian is accountable, which a lot of people in this business today are not, and that pisses me off. Look, Brian is not a show monkey. He is not out here drawing attention to himself with some ego or agenda. Brian Windhorst is great at what he does. Great, Bobby, and I will vouch for him anytime against anyone. And if I were talking to LeBron right now, I'd say that to his face. That's comment number one from Wilbon that I found interesting, and I found he's seems to be addressing LeBron James, but in my view, he's addressing Stephen A. Smith. Brian Windhorst is not a show monkey. And what Wilbon means by that is Brian Windhorst is not one of these clowns that goes on TV and does anything in their power to draw attention to themselves, to try to make themselves the center of discussion. So in order to make that statement, who is he comparing Brian Windhorst to? Stephen A. Smith and First Take. That's what that show is for show monkeys. That's for clowns. That's Wilbon being as politically incorrect as you possibly can be. If a white person were to say this, they'd be accused of racism, but Wilbon's just keeping it 100% real. ESPN has platformed clowns everywhere, and it bothers Wilbon. And to see LeBron James pretend as if Windhorst is one of these clowns, it bothers Mike Wilbon. This is Wilbon pointing a finger at Stephen A. Smith and saying, what has ESPN done? How did we get here? And we got here because ESPN has been planning to do this, and Disney has been planning to do this for decades, ever since Disney took over. ESPN pivoted to a clown show. They don't want to be the worldwide leader. They want to be a circus. And there's no room for guys like Mike Wilbon, Northwestern graduate, decorated journalist, Hall of Fame career at the Washington Post, someone who carries himself with dignity in class. There's no room for him at the top of ESPN, no matter what his accomplishments are. And so now Mike Wilbon is starting to realize, as others are, we're not living in a merit-based society. We're living in a society where Disney and Bob Iger and the agencies that run television in Hollywood set up a clown show. And the price of admission to join the clown show, red floppy shoes, red nose, multicolored hair, buffoonery, become a show monkey. That's how you get paid at ESPN. Play the race card constantly. That's how you get paid at ESPN. Wilbon's had enough. It's beautiful to see. Here's Wilbon's next comment on the influence of social media. Too much, too damn much. They pay much too much attention to it. He's talking about athletes paying way too much attention to social media. They are on it too much. If you can't handle it, get off it. I am off it. I think I still have 4.5 million followers on Twitter, but I don't use it. It wasn't for me anyway. I realized I didn't want to consume the BS. I'm too old for that. Everything is distorted. There's too much glorification. There's too much criticism. There's too much everything. It's an experience in excess. I'm not a child of this era. I'm a child of the mainstream media. There is no accountability in this world. I had to be accountable to bosses and editors. These people on the internet don't. I have to be accountable to the athletes I cover today. If I say something cockeyed about LeBron or Kevin Durant, or going back to John Elway or Emmitt Smith, they had and have every right to come up to me and say, what the hell did you say about me? And then we would have to sit there and talk it out. That's how it should be. People on social media just talk. That's it. They talk and face no accountability. I hate it. So, standards have been removed. There's no system of checks and balances. We've given platforms and given our attention to people with no accountability, no one to answer to. This is the system that has been set up. Once again, I think this is a subtle finger at Stephen A. Smith. But he's talking about the whole system. Because he's even like the death of Around the Horn, that the show that comes on right before PTI. And this is a show that, and I'm just, same people that created PTI were in charge of Around the Horn. Eric Rideholm and his group. I never liked Around the Horn and never appeared on it. I'm not trying, some of the people that run that show and operate it, I know them, I have respect for them. But it was never a show I wanted to be associated with because I could see where it was going. And so what have we looked at the last 10 years? Around the Horn started out with a bunch of newspaper sports writers, accomplished, who had long careers, who had actually accomplished some things. That's where the show started. If you watched it, you knew, like, that ain't where that's going to end up. That's going to be a show for clowns. That's going to be a show for people who have accomplished nothing other than you've been appointed to appear on the circus. And that's where the show, they took the credibility of Woody Page and Tim Calishaw, and even back in the day, Jay Mariotti, and all the guys that had actually accomplished something as journalists, as columnists, and then they used it to build up the credibility of people that have accomplished nothing, that got appointed, that weren't there through merit. They were platformed because they checked a diversity box. And so the next thing you know, you had people like Bomani Jones and others attacking, talking disrespectfully to Bob Ryan or Woody Page or Jackie McMullen. And there was no accountability, no respect for the people that came before them, no deference to the people that actually put the work in. And then the next thing you know, it's like, oh, everybody that's had a cup of coffee at Landscape or Anscape and has written a story or two while high gets to appear on Around the Horn as if what they have to say is important and informed. Nah, it's just an opinion based in virtually nothing. Never covered a team. Never covered a league, never got face-to-face and dealt with athletes and coaches and executives in a real way, never held accountable by a proper set of editors and journalists. Just people with opinions who watch things on TV and heard things on Twitter and then spouted off an opinion. Sarah Spain. You go from, hey, you want to take me to the Super Bowl and my big breast to the Super Bowl, to, hey, now I'm an expert on Around the Horn and I get to wag my finger at everybody else that they don't have my moral integrity. Wilbon is objecting here. Hats off to Mike Wilbon. Next comment, Wilbon talking about the Bronny James coverage. And suggesting that there's way too much coverage of LeBron James's son that was clickbait and that was something he didn't want to participate in. And so this is him subtly but directly addressing, like, LeBron's got a problem with Stephen A about the Bronny coverage, and LeBron may have handled it poorly, but the Bronny coverage is over the top. And so he says, yes, exactly. That's a great way to look at it. And that's because Bobby compares, says, hey, this LeBron Stephen A thing looks like a WWE work. And then so Wilbon goes on, enough, both of them. And look, I'm a father too. Let me let you in on some inside baseball, Bobby, and you probably know this. But pardon the interruption, did not talk about Bronny. We never did. All the Bronny talk that our network did was pandering. It was for clicks and eyeballs. I refused to participate. You can go back and look. PTI didn't cover him except for maybe the real news, like the day he was drafted. Those other shows, it was every day. Bronny, Bronny, Bronny. What the hell is this? It was a disaster waiting to happen. I have a 17-year-old son, so this matters to me. I am particularly sensitive to it. I'd do anything for my kid, and I would hug LeBron for what he did for his kid. I am a father first. That's how I see this story, not as a columnist or a talking head, but as a father first. So I get what LeBron did, and LeBron has also been great to my kid. But as far as coverage, no. There were shows that talked about Bronny every day. You know what shows I'm talking about. I don't care if my bosses get mad. They would try to get Tony and me to talk about it. No, we were not going to do it. Direct shot at Stephen A. Smith and First Take. Direct shot at all the other shows on ESPN. Direct shot at ESPN and the network for lowering its standards and for, but and I'm not chastising Mike because I have great respect for Mike, but they've been doing this forever. The Bronny coverage is no different than the LeBron coverage that I was telling you all about on this show from 2005, 2006, when Skip Bayless started this, the trolling of LeBron James. The centering of Tim Tebow talk every day. Mike is talking about a corrosion, an ongoing corrosion that started 20 years ago. And now, and he's right, this was inevitable. It was going to blow up. As we've transferred the conversation about LeBron into a conversation about Bronny, somebody was going to snap, something was going to give, and he's defending LeBron for putting his foot down and drawing a line in the sand and saying, y'all not finna do this to my boy. I'm not so sure how I feel about the Bronny James coverage, because primarily I blame LeBron for putting his son in that position. But Steve Kim and I will debate that here in a second. I want to get to this very last clip from Mike Wilbon, and then we'll move on to the Korean co-sale. Mike here is talking about the collapse of the sports media, and it's a follow-up question that starts with Bobby Burack pointing out, like, hey, man, ESPN and FS1 talk more about Bronny James than they did Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's the leading or second leading candidate for MVP. Oklahoma City has the best record in basketball, and they've talked more about more about Bronny James than SGA. Wilbon says, that's right. I didn't even think about that. It's true. They talked about him more than Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. That's pandering. It's all pandering. Let me be clear. Our business is a piece of shit a lot of days. There is nobody enforcing standards or having tough conversations. This is what happens when you no longer have functioning newsrooms because everyone is working from hotel rooms, from their bedrooms, and maybe even from their beds. People are not in newsrooms anymore or a studio where you can call them out on their BS. That's a problem. Instead, there are a bunch of 20-year-olds pitching stories while spending all day on social media and reinforcing each other's BS. It's 100% pandering, and I hate it. You know this, Bobby. You see it, but again, I was not critical of LeBron as a dad at all. I feel differently about this than most. I get it. However, Tony and I didn't need to talk about it publicly. Tony understands it too. His son, Michael, works for him, but we aren't talking about Bronny every day. Hell no, this isn't about Stephen A. It's the entire industry. That's what I want to remind LeBron. Our business is just shit some days. It just is. And he's right. When you remove people from a newsroom and from real engagement with older editors, more experienced people, and it's just kids on the internet watching Twitter and tossing out ideas, and there's nobody up above that's got a ton of experience, that's filtering and judging things for fairness and running things through a journalism lens and a set of journalistic standards. And all anyone cares about is, are there clicks here? This is how you create false narratives and fake narratives. And this is how Mike doesn't maybe fully realize the full scope of what he's saying, but I'm going to connect it to something that just brings it all together. The environment that Mike is talking about is how you get a Black Lives Matter narrative off the ground. It's how you convince people that, let's say, 400 black men and 550 white men per year get shot by police. 400 black men, 550 white men a year get shot by police. And police have hundreds of millions of engagements with the most armed population in the history of the planet. Let's think this through. And this isn't an anti-gun rant. It's a pro-gun rant. We got all these guns. That's why we have so much freedom. You take away our guns, our freedoms go away. I'm not anti-gun. But there's a reality that goes along with having a society that is this heavily armed and this heavily policed. There's going to be multiple engagements. And then so 400 times for black men, 550 or so for white guys, the engagements between police and the citizenry goes too far and someone gets shot. This is just a natural repercussion of a heavily armed society that's heavily armed to protect our freedoms and rights and needs to have this. And so there's consequences to every decision. Hey, take away the guns. Take away the freedom. So take away the guns. That means the government will show up with guns and force you to take a vaccine that you don't want and that God hasn't prescribed for you. So I'm for the guns. And I will deal with the consequences that, look, some people are going to get shot. And a high percentage of them are going to be people who think it's their job to bicker and argue with the police. See, when there's an editor and there's common sense in the room and we're about truth and not building some fake narrative, someone would say, hey man, I see a lot of these videos and there may only be one or two a year where the person isn't bickering with the police. And yes, black men are only 6%, 7% of the American population. What percentage are they that choose to bicker and fight with the police? And so if you're only 6, 7% of the population, but you're 75% of the people that think, oh man, I just got pulled over by the police. Let me give this man some attitude and let me bicker and argue with him. Well, you've just increased your chances of getting shot by the police. I've never been shot by the police. I've never had a policeman draw a gun on me. I've never been close to any type of violent encounter with the police. And I get pulled over a lot because I like the speed. And it's because I don't bicker and argue with them. I tell them what they want to hear. And they generally smile and go away. I get a ticket, I get a warning, I get a, hey man, thank you for being so nice. I'm gonna give you a warning. Those are the two reactions I get. I get a ticket or I get a, hey damn, that was a pleasant experience. Here's your warning ticket. Slow it down, Whitlock. I never get, hey, let me draw my gun. Hey, let me push or shove you. Hey, let me slap you across the face. Hey, let me drag you out of your car. Never get it. But we live in this little fake world, fake media world, where because there's people are from home and they're following everything on the internet, we fall off into these narratives. Oh, yes, the police are just running around randomly killing black men. And you know what? Let's burn down buildings and loot buildings and businesses because this problem is so out of hand. It's dangerous what we've done and the lies that we've legalized by the destruction of the media and no one getting held accountable. And so Wilbon is arguing here, as it relates to LeBron James, ESPN has gone 20 years without holding anybody at First Take accountable for the idiocy and the trolling that is done there. And so Wilbon is saying that, hey, Skip Bayless started trolling LeBron James in 2005, trying to get cold pizza and First Take off the ground. And he's saying, like, all that trolling and all that lack of accountability and all the different trolling of athletes and all that, it was inevitable. It was going to end up with LeBron James or some athlete confronting Stephen A. Smith or Skip Bayless and things getting very, very hostile. And if ESPN had done its job and said, hey, man, we're the worldwide leader in sports. We print money over here. We're not going to lead the rest of the media down this path. Embrace debate. Embrace clickbait is what it really was. But ESPN went that route. And Mike Wilbon is upset that they went this route and gave a big pot of gold to the clown that led the entire thing. The head of the circus. Well, I don't know what they call him. The headmaster of the circus, or there's some name for it. Anyway, Stephen A. Smith is that guy. And he's getting $100 million for leading the clown show that has destroyed sports media and made the media S-H-I-T, according to Mike. All right. Thought I could do that in 30 minutes. Took me 45. Steve Kim, the Korean co-cell. Next.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. There's something bad going on with American men. It's been obvious for a while. It's measurable in a million different ways, but it's also right in front of your face. We have a massive problem with American men, and very few people have even bothered to notice, much less take it seriously. One of them is my friend Jason Whitlock in Nashville, who I've known for a long time and really love. He's decent and smart and totally fearless. And for that reason, I'm joining him on Friday, May 2nd in Nashville for the Roll Call 3.0 conference. And I literally can't wait to do it. I'm flying down just for that, and I'm excited for it because I think this really matters, and I think Jason is wise on the subject. So I'm there to talk, but also to learn, and I hope to see you there.
Join us at Fearless Roll Call 3.0. Real men, real conversations, real purpose. Tickets at fearlessrollcall.com.
Men, it's time to rise. Our country, our faith, our future, all under attack. I'm bringing the boldest voices to Nashville. Roll Call 3.0 is your call to action. Join me, join Tucker, and let's take a stand together. May 2nd and 3rd in Nashville. I am Jason Whitlock, your host.
Went without so that he could give you an abundant life.
Young men shall utterly fall. Jason, I know you called us to preach off, but I feel like preaching up in here right about now.
Yeah, 모두 다 빨리 박수 쳐 기다리지 말고 서둘러 Reason that I'm back is to feed you raps I see that you are 배불러 So fly
All right, welcome back. I know you guys are disappointed that I made you wait this long for the Korean co-cell, but Steve Kim will be worth the wait. Steve, your reaction to Mike Wilbon's interview with Bobby Burack?
Well, first of all, good Monday to everybody. Jason, like yourself, I was a little bit stunned that Mr. Wilbon went on with Bobby. Now, I like Bobby. Bobby is he's a renegade. He tells it like it is, and he ruffles a lot of feathers over there in Bristol. I respect the fact that he's not hesitant. He has a point of view, and he's going to consistently enforce it and be opinionated and be consistent. And I'm actually surprised that Wilbon did the interview, given the fact that having worked there, I know that a lot of on-air talent, or even if you're just a writer, you had to clear your interviews. Now, maybe Wilbon is at that stage or that plateau where he just interviews whoever he wants to or with, and I think that's probably what happened. But I think he has a lot of points here. And the one thing that stood out to me that I thought immediately last week, Jason, I did think what LeBron said about Windhorst was really unfair. I do. I've always thought Windhorst has been a consummate professional. And look, that's a tough job, given who you're covering, because LeBron is such a polarizing figure that even if you're just fair with him, if you're not punitive in your criticism, you're looked upon as a house man, and you're looked upon as a supplicant. And then on the flip side, I know the way it works because I've had great relationships in boxing that have wavered. If you are critical even once, now you're looked upon as the enemy, and you have to toe that line. And I'm not exactly so sure what he's expecting from Windhorst. Do you want someone that covers you fairly, or do you want a publicist? And yes, Jason, I do realize that is a rhetorical question.
Yeah, the Windhorst shot makes no sense to me, other than perhaps, I mean, it's a miscalculation on LeBron's part of, hey, let me take a shot at a white guy and social media will eat it up. LeBron is standing up to the man. I just don't want it to be a feud between me and Stephen A. Smith. That'll look like black on black crime. So let me find a white victim. Let me find a white person to attack, to take my aggression out on. That's the only thing I think could make this make sense. Steve, I want to get your thoughts. If you could be a fly on the wall and what do you think Stan Verrett and Mark Jones's reaction were to Mike Wilbon doing an interview with Bobby Burack?
Well, they're probably thinking, man, this guy's going all Whitlock. He's gone all Whitlock, and they're probably using the rhyme, the word that rhymes with boon, yell out. They're probably using all those terms as they play, tough guy, these civil rights activists, these online revolutionaries. But I just find the whole thing interesting in a sense that I do think that Wilbon, who you mentioned, along with Kornheiser, they are one of the foundations of the ESPN programming, at least in terms of when it was still considered the standard of sports programming. And he probably looks at all this junk and all these people that are now, I don't want to say infiltrating, but now into that space of talking heads. That's what we are. We're talking heads. And I don't use that as a pejorative. But he's probably looking around going, geez, what in the world has happened here? And look at this clown show that's being run. Only thing we're missing is 3 rings and elephant crap all over the place. And that's probably what he's thinking. Now, I actually happen to disagree with him about his take on Bronny. I believe that story was basically created by LeBron James himself, and it is a story. When you are given this type of position, and much of it seems to be unearned, and you actually bring your son up as a show pony to say, hey, I'm making history here, and whatever team has me has to have him. Well, I would disagree with Mike Wilbon. At that point, it is a story. Now, it doesn't have to be covered daily. I agree with that, but I do think it goes beyond a father-son relationship.
Yeah, I think that Mike and a lot of people are struggling to deal with what do you do when you acquire immense power in your industry and then you get up in age and the next thing you know, you're Chris Collinsworth at NBC and you can make them, hey, my son wants to go into broadcasting, and you have the leverage to make that happen. And your Tony Kornheiser and you've run a business in your own career so successfully, you can now turn around and employ your son, from what I understand, and I'm not 1,000% sure of this, but from what I understand, Stephen A. Smith has used his power to create some acting opportunities for one of his daughters. That's my understanding. I could be wrong on it. And Wilbon now with a 17-year-old son is sitting there thinking, hey, what am I going to do as my son transitions into college and then post-college? You know, how should I help him? And I think, particularly when you're talking about journalists and Stephen A., Mike Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser, myself, we all entered into journalism thinking that we would never be wealthy. It was never a thought in our mind. Thought we might be successful, thought we might make good money, but, you know, these guys, you know, Tony, Mike, Stephen A., I mean, they've made a significant amount of money, and that was never their game plan. And so I just think they're sympathetic to LeBron because, again, they haven't made LeBron's money, but they've acquired a lot of money and power within their industries, and they don't know how to best utilize that for their kids, and so they're more sympathetic to LeBron.
So let's get this clear. Nepotism is now good. Okay, fine. If that is the chosen, approved messaging and agenda, I get it. But Jason, to your point about the names that you mentioned, and I think you touched upon this, the difference is a lot of those names, they covered a beat. They did all the things. They probably began their careers on the copy desk, and they had to cover high school sports. They're probably not even the varsity stuff, and probably not even football or basketball. They probably had to do volleyball and softball for a couple of years. Then they had to do stringer reports. And they probably, instead of getting the Lakers, they got the Clippers version of that beat in that city. But they worked their way up, right? They put in their dues. Then they became a columnist, and they grinded at it. So I don't know if they want to admit it, but they're like, wait a minute. This took me a hard road. I was basically the minor leaguer that rode the bus before I made the big show, right? And you're right. There's a level of credibility to some of these older veterans on the beat that are on these shows that to me is valuable. And maybe because I'm old, but when I look at Jackie McMullen, excuse me, I always botch that name. I have so much respect for her because she covered the beat. I just recently bought one of her books. It was about the Magic Bird rivalry, Celtics Lakers of the 80s. Now, I got about 25 books I got to read. I don't know when I'm going to read it. But Jason, I just flipped through it for about 10 minutes when it arrived at my door. The depth of knowledge that she has from being there and the research and the work that she put in. So she is one of those rare people that if I'm flipping through the channel, I'm at a hotel, I'm traveling, and I'm checking in. If she's on that box and they're talking NBA, I'm going to be like, you know what? I might actually stick around here to see what she has to say about the league because there's a difference. Everybody has an opinion. You know what opinions are like. We all have one. Number two, everyone has a little bit of knowledge because we can all Google and we can all get facts. But three, this is the toughest part, Jason. Not everybody has wisdom. To me, Jackie has wisdom. She has earned that. Much like the way a lot of these writers that we grew up liking, they earn that. But that's not something that could just be given through going viral. That is something you have to put work in, and it takes time.
Steve, my take on Wilbon's interview is that he took a direct shot at Stephen A. Smith, several of them.
Yeah.
Do you read it that way? Is this Mike saying like, first take, ESPN, $100 million, guy running for president, I've had it?
I think it's an indirect, direct shot. I think politically and socially, if he specifically said this is directed toward a guy with the initials SAS, I don't think, look, based on what he said about social media, he doesn't want any, not that he wants the heat or can't handle it. I think he's just like, he's so above it. He doesn't want the hassle. To him, it is such a distraction at that point. But I will say this, I'm going to draw this comparison. Michael Wilbon was in the inner circle of Michael Jordan in the 90s when Michael kind of shifted his personality, became much more cynical, much more of a hardened individual. Wilbon had some access that not many other people got. I believe that he was a trusted member, a trusted ally of Jordan, which is fine. We all have relationships, Jason. We might as well just come out and admit it, right? The difference is, and I guarantee, this is what my assumption is, that when Wilbon saw that guy, Nick Wright, acting like a flat-out groupie, waiting to touch the exalted hand of LeBron, and acting like a teenage girl at an NSYNC concert, I guarantee you Wilbon's like, right there, I'm talking to right there. This is where our business has gone to SHIT. Because even in Ahmad Rashad, we all knew Ahmad and Michael were more than just media and athlete. But there were certain times and places for everything that in a public setting, Ahmad would do his job and then they would do whatever they did off air, right? But they would never do that. I think that's one of those things that Wilbon is looking at going, that's the business today. That right there, what happened.
I do think he's looking at that. I think he's got I have a slightly different take on the whole Nick Wright and LeBron on the sidelines of a game, just because the fact that Nick Wright shaking hands with, dapping up LeBron James on the sidelines, the fact that that's newsworthy because of social media, that's what bothers me about it. It's all the posts, and I can't even blame the clickbait people because they're serving up what the audience wants. And so people are like, oh, let's watch Nick Wright shake hands with LeBron James. This is newsworthy. This is significant. That's what bothers me. It's like we're so immersed in idolatry that we're treating, and this is a biblical reference, Steve, about a woman in the Bible that touched the hem of Jesus' garment and was healed. We're treating touching LeBron James like it's touching Jesus Christ. And, hey, this is news. Let's watch this. Nick Wright touched the hem of the garment of LeBron James. And I just sit there and go, how did we get here? Social media has done this to us. It's Steve, your reaction, what do you think Stephen A. Smith thinks of this interview?
That's a good question. I'm not even so sure, based on what he's got going on right now, that he would draw the inference that Michael Wilbon in any way is referring to him. I don't, because after all, he's a potential sort of presidential candidate. I mean, Jason, on my way home from Las Vegas yesterday, I actually punched up his rebuttal about him being a MAGA mouthpiece, and he said some interesting things. His ego might be so big, which may be earned, he may actually think he's above it, that Wilbon would never criticize him. That's my view of it.
Now, let me connect some more dots for you. This may help you or give you a different take. Stephen A. is going to reads that deal and is like, hey, man, he's basically saying what Dan Le Batard has been saying about me and Skip Bayless for the past 2 or 3 years. Remember, and just keep in mind, Le Batard, Wilbon, Tony Kornheiser, myself, we all used to run in the same group, all used to kind of think the same thing. And so when Le Batard was out here 2 or 3 years ago saying, hey, Skip Bayless and Stephen A. Smith ruined sports media, and this is what you've done, and questioning Stephen A. publicly about it, this is just Wilbon jumping on that same bandwagon because it bothered, let me be careful here, it bothered me, and I assumed, assumed that it bothered Tony and Mike, that for years, they're the dominant show on ESPN, drew millions of viewers for years, and ESPN pretended like First Take was the most important and most relevant show. I just, Stephen A would have to put some big blinders on not to see this as like, oh, Wilbon's doing the same thing more politely than what Dan Le Batard has done and what Jason Whitlock has done very impolitely. Uh-oh. Steve can't hear me? I think Steve, can you guys still hear me? Because it's clear Steve cannot hear me. You're giving me the thumbs up, but no one can, I don't think Steve can hear me. Let's take another break and we'll come back with Steve and we'll move into a couple of other topics. Can we take another break? I think we can, and we'll come back once we correct Steve's audio. Don't go anywhere. Steve, Kim, and I. Next.
ESPN sucks.
No.
You didn't give Sean Alexander.
Yes!
DK.
Yes!
I would imagine
I
DK
knew
Metcalf.
it!
That's exactly
Did
what
I not
DK
whisper
Metcalf
that to
sounds
you?
like.
I knew it!
The Warriors ceiling with Jimmy right now is a first-round exit, okay? Listen, I was looking for the Warriors. I'm thinking that they're going to go out there and, go get a Beyonce or Taylor Swift. They end up getting a Nicki Minaj, and that's okay.
Whoa, you about to...
That's just...
Hey, listen.
But that's not...
Whoa.
But that's not... But that's...
The Barbie's gonna get you, boy. The Barb's gonna get you, boy.
Ain't hard to find. Listen.
And that's why
ESPN sucks.
Men, it's time to rise. Our country, our faith, our future, all under attack. I'm bringing the boldest voices to Nashville. Roll Call 3.0 is your call to action. Join me, join Tucker, and let's take a stand together. May 2nd and 3rd in Nashville. I am Jason Whitlock, your host.
Went without so that he could give you an abundant life. Now it's time for you to evade the ego trip so that someone else can live better. Amen.
It's necessary that we decide to become men of character, of godly intent.
He gives power to the saints, and to them that have no might he increases strength. Even you shall faint and be weary. Young men shall utterly fall. Jason, I know you called us to preach off, but I feel like preaching up in here right about now.
Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. There's something bad going on with American men. It's been obvious for a while. It's measurable in a million different ways, but it's also right in front of your face. We have a massive problem with American men, and very few people have even bothered to notice, much less take it seriously. One of them is my friend Jason Whitlock in Nashville, who I've known for a long time and really love. He's decent and smart and totally fearless. And for that reason, I'm joining him on Friday, May 2nd in Nashville for the Roll Call 3.0 conference. And I literally can't wait to do it. I'm flying down just for that, and I'm excited for it because I think this really matters, and I think Jason is wise on the subject. So I'm there to talk, but also to learn, and I hope to see you there.
Join us at Fearless Roll Call 3.0. Real men, real conversations, real purpose. Tickets at fearlessrollcall.com.
All right, welcome back. Welcome back. We've had technical difficulties with Steve Kim. There's some other topics that I promised you all that I'll get into. Then we'll get to Shemeka Michelle. Then we'll end the show with me talking about Bruce Pearl. And so I want to talk about, just for a moment, give you my take on this NCAA Final Four and how all the chalk has advanced. You got 4 number 1 seeds, I believe, in the men's tournament: Houston, Duke, Auburn, and who am I forgetting? Houston, Duke, Auburn is what this whole thing is. It's been a boring NCAA tournament. The women's tournament, nearly the same thing going on. South Carolina's played in some close games, but not really in my view. But you got 2 number 1 seeds there. UConn, a number 2 seed that gets to face USC without Juju Watkins. So basically, I think it's going to be all chalk in the women's bracket as well, for the most part. This, to me, is an indication of where we have gone as it relates to the NCAA tournament, as it relates to college sports. The power conferences, the teams that can assemble the most talent through the transfer portal and through name, image, and likeness are going to dominate. And it's not that I wanted small schools in the Final Four, but I did like and enjoy the upsets. Oh, a 3 seed made it, a 4 seed. All of this has been inevitable. Most people want to say, hey, this is just a one-off. This is just, you know, it's happened before. I think in 1985, maybe all the number 1 seeds made it. But no, this is where it's been headed for the last 3 or 4 years. Really, the last 20 years. You've built a system where the powered schools that are connected to the most powerful agents, because by inviting this name, image, and likeness and transfer portal into the process the way that it has been, it's increased the influence of agents and agencies. The time when high school coaches and summer basketball coaches had some sort of influence over where players went, that era is done. This whole thing is a controlled system now by the agencies. That's the outgrowth, the outcome, the consequence of name, image, and likeness and the transfer portal. These kids all get an agent pretty much by age 15, 14. All of them, any kid that goes to high school with your son or daughter, if he's 14 years old and 6'1", 6'2", let alone 6'5", 6'6", and has shown any athleticism, there's an agent on his tail. And there's an agent that's recruiting him and the family and maybe funneling a little money to the family. And that agent has complete control. There was a time when the high school basketball coaches, and they've been demonized, all these high school basketball coaches, they're terrible and they didn't do this or they didn't do that for my son. High school's been removed from the system. It's all a summer basketball, AAU basketball thing. And the next thing you know, AAU coaches had a lot of influence. Well, now all the AAU coaches have real relationships with these high-profile agencies all out of Hollywood. And so they have created an elitist system that governs basketball. And that elitist system is going to favor the elites. And so sports, when it was founded and organized by the Young Men's Christian Athletic Association, by the Catholic Youth Organizations, the CYO, when those things were in control, sports used to mirror American society, and they would message like, hey, hard work, merit, you don't have to be the best finance, you don't have to have the best connections. If you're able to construct a team and you work harder and you adopt a better strategy, you too can realize the American dream. That's been destroyed. And no one wants to talk about it. Everyone wants to be in denial and say, hey, this is better. It's not better, and it doesn't promote the right values. Point 2, the other topic I wanted to get into, I want to play you this clip of the brawl between the Pistons and the Pistons and the Timberwolves from last night. I want to ask you, big deal, little deal, or no deal? Let's play the brawl, the malice in Minnesota. Let's play that clip.
Holland was a really good high school player. Good fake.
Reed turned the corner and is fouled by Holland.
Man, oh, come on now.
Stevens. Big time brawl now in the front row.
Gotta stay.
It's going to take a lot to break this up.
You got to stay out of the crowd. This is not good.
This has been building on the last handful of possessions.
This is being treated as a super big deal. I don't get it. I don't see it. And I'm not taking a dump on anybody. I'm not taking a dump on the NBA. I'm not taking a dump on these players. But this is, I mean, skirmishes like this happened all the time in the old school NBA. No harm, no foul. No one got hurt. It's not like Kermit Washington nearly killed Rudy Tomjanovich. This is nothing. This is actually, hey, these guys actually care a little bit and talked a little trash to each other. I'm going to say no deal here. I just don't see this as some huge deal. Men competing in a sport occasionally push and shove each other, and it gets a little out of hand. And, you know, in basketball, it's so intimate. The fans sit so close. It might spill into their lap. And I know there was something where one of the players may have been holding or, had some kind of headlock on a fan or whatever. But this isn't akin to the malice in the palace. I just don't see this as a big deal. Don't see it as a big deal. No deal. What do you think? Finally, I want to briefly address Deion Sanders. Got a new contract from Colorado. They've been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And finally, Deion's got a contract, I think, is it 5 years and $54 million, I believe. And so I want to put up this graphic of the competition, where Deion's at with all these other coaches. Kirby Smart, $13.2 million. Ryan Day, $12.5. Dabo Sweeney, $11.5 million. Dan Lanning, $11 million. Steve Sarkisian, $10.8 billion. Lincoln Riley, $10.1 billion. Kellen DeBoer, $10.25. Deion Sanders, $10 million. Bill Belichick, $10 million. Look at that list. And I don't think, did Kalen DeBoer, someone help me out here, did he lead his previous team to the playoffs? Or I can't, but everybody else has got some real accomplishments on their resume. Deion, I believe, is 13-12 at Colorado. And I know many, Colorado was the worst program in the history of college football. No one had ever accomplished what Deion has done in taking over Colorado. They won one game and, okay, I get it. But 13-12. And he's getting paid like he's all of these other teams. And yeah, I'm right. Kellen DeBoer, they lost to Michigan in the title game, if my memory is operating properly. So all of these coaches, yeah, he was at Washington with Michael Penix. And so all of these coaches, like, oh boy, they've done some really big things. Bill Belichick obviously has won 6 Super Bowls and is known as the greatest coach in professional football history. And so I say all this not to say that Deion's money is undeserved, because the economic impact, the relevancy that Colorado has, and the trajectory that they're on isn't bad. But could we quit pretending like, these black coaches and these black people, they got to do 10 times as much to get half the credit, half the rewards of their white counterparts? Could we stop that? Because Deion ain't done 10 times as much. He ain't done 9 times as much. He ain't done 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2. He hasn't done as much as the people that are getting paid more than him or in his ballpark. Hasn't happened. But he's getting paid like he has. That's the system we've built. That there is a privilege and advantages to being black and to leaning into black racial idolatry. Deion's done that. The puppet masters are thrilled with Deion, and they've rewarded him like he's accomplished these great things that the other coaches have accomplished. And say, hey, look, some of these coaches on that list, Kalen DeBoer, he may flame out at Alabama. Who knows? Dabo Swinney's best days may be behind him. But, oh boy, they've done a lot. And I'm not saying Deion's done nothing, but he ain't did what they did to get to $10 million a year. Could we stop it? Deion and these black, they're not carrying crosses. They're not, oh, nobody knows the trouble. Ain't happening. Deion cut in line. Great former player that got the Jackson State coaching job because he's a great former player and a brand. Colorado job because he's a great former player and a brand. And now he's getting $10 million a year because he's a great former player, a brand, and someone that, you know, won, what did they win, 9 games last year or 8 games last year? What did they win 10? Anyway, won a few games at Colorado and exceeded very low expectations at Colorado, and now he's getting paid. All right. Wanted to get that off my chest. Shemeka Michelle. We'll talk about Jasmine Crockett and Byron Donalds. Next.
ESPN sucks.
Wait a minute. No, let me finish my point. You don't care about small markets, and for you, it's always box office. You're a New Yorker that's an Alabama fan. It's just not sexy enough for you, but you're seeing it through your lens, and not through all football players. I know you don't care about my opinion.
That doesn't give you a license to misrepresent me.
Two of the best to ever do it. When you look at Moses Moody, what he did in college.
Are well within their rights to note that he is espousing that opinion on a personality-driven program that employs him as a personality during the NFL season. That context does matter here. The other context that matters.
And that's why
ESPN sucks.
All right, welcome back. Time for Shemeka Michelle. Shemeka, welcome back to the show. I believe Jasmine Crockett, didn't she express some, she expressed some difficulty understanding or said that Byron Donalds was whitewashed or something because he's married to a white woman. I found this interesting. This is a leftist who's expressing some racial animus, which seems to go against what leftists say they stand for. But anyway, let's play Jasmine Ratchet here, and let's hear her talk about Byron Donalds and his wife.
And if we continue to put people into office, and that even means some of our skinfolk who definitely are not our kinfolk, such as Byron Donalds, who are going to continue to say that, like, I mean, the fact that you sitting around talking about life was better under Jim Crow, like, is this because you don't understand history? Or literally it's because you married a white woman and so you think that that whitewashed you. I'm not really sure, like, what it is.
Well,
but
you
I
couldn't
need
even be married to a white woman under Jim
correct, correct. And it took Joy to call him out. So I'm like, bruh, like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you saying? Like, he just out here, you know, I feel like they give him his talking points and he's like, yes, massa, I got it.
Now, Kamala Harris married a white Jewish man. I haven't heard Jasmine Crockett talk about that. Ketanji Brown Jackson, I believe she's married to a white Jewish man. Haven't heard Jasmine Crockett talk about that. All this ghetto in the streets, colonizing the sheets, they got nothing to say about this. This is the leftist playbook. And make it make sense for me, Shemeka. Is Jasmine Crockett holding Byron Donalds to a standard that she doesn't hold leftist politicians to?
Absolutely. And it shows that she's so illogical and just irrational. She is a mutt in the highest order. Like, this is what they do. They just spew trash talking points that make absolutely no sense. Because if this was the case, then as you just stated, she would have to hold Kamala and Ketanji Brown, Don Lemon. She would have to hold all of them to the same standard, and she doesn't. So this lets us know that this is because Byron Donalds is not going along with the everyday okey-doke black talking points that they like to push on black people. The Democrat talking points. So she has a problem with him having his own mind. And that whole Jim Crow statement is taken completely out of context. I don't even understand how some people got that he was saying it was a better time. Like, if you listen to the entire thing, that's not what he was saying, but this is what they do. And she went on the Breakfast Club and nobody called her out for it, as she sat there shaking hair and constantly pushing it back. That's not hers. That does not resemble the hair that grows out of her scalp. And I just don't take these type of women seriously, because again, when you see them online, they have so much to say about black men that marry white women, but nothing to say about black women that marry white men. I'm sure she has esteemed Serena Williams. She's probably big up Eve. She probably loved when Meghan Markle married Harry. But when it's the other way around, all of a sudden this man is whitewashed, or it's because he's skin folk but not kinfolk. That's ridiculous, but it goes back to what we've been saying all along. They like to put these loudmouth black women in positions of power because they are the ones that will stand flat-footed and say things that make absolutely no sense. But as long as they say it loud enough and with enough neck rolling and eyelashes, people will buy into it, because that's what we applaud: degeneracy and buffoonery.
So I'm going to say the real quiet and uncomfortable part out loud and get myself into trouble and make more people hate me. But I just, based on the data in terms of divorce rates, in terms of feminism, in terms of women willing to be a helpmeet, wouldn't the data say that there's a demographic of women that in a great high percentage want no part of submitting to men, want no part of supporting male leadership, want no part of participating in a patriarchal culture? And I believe Byron Donalds was previously married to a black woman. Now, there's a bit of controversy about what that marriage was about. Someone getting citizenship, I think, was partially about that when I've read up on the marriage. But isn't Byron Donalds just being mathematical and logical and saying, like, hey, I'm going to choose the demographic that seems to be in support of marriage and seems to be in support of male leadership? And there's a demographic that I come from that here in America at like a 90, maybe 6% clip has no interest in doing that. And so he's like water. He's going to go the path of least resistance.
Yeah, I do think I saw somewhere that white women have a very high divorce rate. Like, if you marry one, it's like a very high chance that you'll get divorced. But when it comes to the submission and the desire to be married, I have to agree with you, because so many black women are on the whole I don't need a man train. So even if they do try to hook up with a man, they're not willing to be submissive. They're not willing to be agreeable. Many of them don't want to be fit. They're fat and out of shape. 4 out of 5 black women are overweight. So they just don't want to line line up with the idea of marriage. And Jasmine Crockett is 43, never been married, and doesn't have any children. So she doesn't even seem like she's interested in being married. And so many are not. They want to have children, some of them, but not want to actually be a helpmeet. They don't want to bring that support and assistance to a man, and they just don't want to do it. So I do think Byron Donalds has been married for 20 years. This woman is tried and true at this point. So hopefully that didn't shake him. I'm pretty sure it didn't. But no one is going to actually look and say, you know, Jasmine has a point. She doesn't have a point when you look at all of the Democrats that she tells us we need to support that have also married outside of their race.
I don't want to beat up. Well, I actually do want to beat up this point just because I just think it's important. It's Black women and the embrace of the matriarchy and the embrace of feminism. They have no idea what they're doing to their sons. And so you become a mother while being a feminist, while preaching, I don't need a man, and you don't understand the nature of your son. Even if he's raised improperly, there's something within a man that wants to be a leader, wants to be a patriarch. And if he doesn't see the helpmeet mentality in his mother, he's gonna start assuming like, this ain't what Black women do. And if he has that desire of like, hey, I want to help me, I want an anti-feminist, not a feminist, and his example in his home and in his upbringing is a hardcore feminist, it's going to make him look elsewhere for, okay, well, who was raised in a home and who actually wants to support a man and live out a biblical lifestyle? We're victims of a mentality that is so widespread within our culture, and only, you know, the Black man can correct it, but he needs some help from the Black woman to correct it. And so I look at Byron Donalds and I look at the men that have taken a lot of flack for marrying outside their race, and it's like, well, maybe they're just reacting to what they see from the data, what they see from their own upbringing. Maybe they feel like they have no choice if they want to be a real man and be a leader in the home, because maybe it's just not allowed among a high percentage of Black women.
Yeah, I do think the stifling of a Black man's voice began in the home. For a lot of them, you hear the mother, of course, as a son, you do have to respect your parent. And for a lot of them, they've constantly been told to shut up. You know, you just like your daddy, you won't be anything. And I'm not saying that this, of course, is across the board for Black mothers, because there are a lot of excellent mothers out here. I have to say that for those who are too intellectually short to add their own quantifiers. So I'm being nice today. This isn't across the board, but there are a lot of men who grew up in a home where they didn't have a voice, where they didn't have a say-so, and they were never nurtured properly, and they didn't have that example. I constantly go back to the Bible where it says stuff like Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob. I think it takes a man to make another man. And when that man is absent and that woman hasn't lived a life to actually put those type of individuals in that male child's life, he doesn't know how to act. And so he gets a lot of his cues from his mother. We will see men be totally emotionally irrational because that's what he learned from the female in his home. He never had that male there to say, hey, you're feeling like this. This is how you handle that emotion. You're feeling this way. This is how you handle that type of energy. They don't have that. And so you see a lot of men, and it is so prevalent online. You see a lot of men that if you could visualize them, they're neck rolling and snapping their hands when they talk, because that's what they saw. And you see it every day in the way that they handle things. They have a lack of conflict resolution skills. They don't know how to handle it because they haven't seen it. And there has been no man in their life to steer them in the right direction. So this matriarchal culture has really hurt us. And it hasn't just affected the females. We like to just focus on the female because, of course, you know, we do have the women that are loud and saying, I don't need a man, but there are so many men who just got the wrong direction, who want to be leaders, but they don't know how because it was never instilled in them as a child. And so they grow up, you see these teenage boys, they're so angry simply because they have all this male energy, this testosterone raging through them, and they don't know what to do with it. The only thing they know to do is to go have baby after baby after baby, and they don't know how to actually funnel that energy into productive ways because they've never been taught. There was no one to begat them, and it shows.
Shemeka, we'll end this there. I don't want the audience to go anywhere. I've got some thoughts on Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers that you don't want to miss. I'll do that next. I've struggled with my health and weight loss most of my life, feeling sore, low energy, and having a hard time staying mentally sharp. But Relief Factor, it's changed all of that. I feel better, I move better, I think better. It's been a real transformation. And here's the thing, it's only $20 to try. If Relief Factor works for me, and I'm no easy case, it can work for anyone. Don't wait, call 1-800-4RELIEF or visit relieffactor.com. All right, welcome back. Welcome back to the show. I wanted to end the show with some thoughts on Bruce Pearl and the Auburn Tigers, and an interesting thought, realization, epiphany that I had over the weekend watching the Auburn Tigers play really at a high level, dominate, make it the Final Four, and just Bruce Pearl over the last year. I think it leads to some interesting realizations about where we are in sports and where we are in the hypocrisy of conversation and freedom within sports. I want to play for you a clip of Bruce Pearl calling for the release of the hostages in Gaza and just how political Bruce Pearl has been. Let's play the clip.
But for me, I believe it was God's plan to give us this success beyond what we deserve, to give us this platform, to give me an opportunity to just start this press conference really briefly and remind the world that Eden Alexander is still held hostage in Gaza right now. An American held hostage. And there aren't enough people in this country that know his name. So I asked the players if it was okay if I started out this press conference and just called out the name of an American. Bring the hostages home.
I want to play another clip of Bruce Pearl, and this is him talking about anti-Semitism. Let's play the clip.
With Israel being at war and the tremendous increase and rise in anti-Semitism, public display of anti-Semitism in this country, and the things that sort of led up to a couple of Holocausts that have taken place, one back in Germany and the other one on October 7th, a year and a half ago. And so Dr. King said silence is complicity. I'm not going to be silent. As an American Jewish person that is in the public eye, I feel like it's my responsibility to try to speak the truth, know my Bible, know my history, because we do have a problem with education in this country. And so as a teacher and a coach, I do spend most of my time just trying to provide accurate information so people can have a better understanding of the situation.
Now I want to share with you a tweet, and Bruce Pearl's Twitter feed, X account, has been filled with these types of tweets for much of the past year. This is him unapologetically supporting Donald Trump. President Trump won big because more Americans believed he will fix inflation, secure our borders, support legal immigration, bring peace to the world through strength, and put America first. I pray and believe he will work for all Americans, uniting us as one nation under God. Here's Bruce Pearl after the assassination attempt on President Trump. Thank God President Trump survived this assassination attempt. His courageous reaction moments after getting shot tells you he is willing to take a bullet and fight for this country. Political violence has been tolerated. The media, Justice Department, and others are complicit. Let me be clear. I don't have a problem with and am supportive of Bruce Pearl and the things that he has said and the way that he has operated publicly over the last year, I think makes perfect sense. I find Bruce Pearl's boldness about his beliefs inspiring. I find Bruce Pearl's transparency about his beliefs inspiring. I do, however, think there's a double standard at play, that Bruce Pearl has been about as pro-Trump as any public figure that I've seen. And he's done it without consequence. And that intrigues me or baffles me or makes me say, he's enjoying a level of freedom that others are not. That he can speak publicly about his support of Donald Trump without anybody accusing him of being a racist, without the media asking his players questions of like, hey, Bruce Pearl supports Donald Trump. Don't you think that's racist? Are you comfortable with that? Isn't Donald Trump anti-black and your coach support? That, as far as I know, and maybe you all can correct me, hop in the chat, email me, fearlessblazeshow@gmail.com. I just haven't seen the media try to put Bruce Pearl in the trick bag and try to force division within his basketball team because of his unapologetic support of Donald Trump. Whereas we know that if a black or white coach in America that was this high profile, leading the #1 team in the country in basketball, if they were leading, if Marcus Freeman was leading Notre Dame and they were in the playoffs and he was an out of the closet Trump, them black football players at Notre Dame would have to answer for that. But this is a non-issue as it relates to Bruce Pearl. Auburn's #1 supporter is Charles Barkley. Someone, again, you guys know, I like Charles. But Charles Barkley goes on TV and pretends like he hates Donald Trump. And he has to do that. Because you'll never convince me that Charles Barkley hates Donald Trump. There's just no way. They're the same guy. They love the same thing. chasing tail. Good tail. High quality tail. Love it. They're politically incorrect. Both of them. Say all kinds of things in unorthodox ways that irritates people. And I'm supposed to believe that Charles Barkley hates Donald Trump. He has to pretend he hates Donald Trump. And so he does. Because if Charles Barkley really hated Donald Trump the way that he pretends, he'd have something to say about the head coach at his alma mater being an out-of-the-closet Trump supporter. Charles Barkley doesn't have the same level of freedom as Bruce Pearl. Why is that? Why would the typical American white coach, who I guarantee you 97.8% of them feel about Donald Trump the exact same way that Bruce Pearl feels about Donald Trump? But they're not free to say it. There would be major ramifications. The mainstream media would hit every press conference asking their quarterback or point guard or the mama of the quarterback or point guard, what do you think about X, Y, and Z coach and his love of Donald Trump? Doesn't that make you uncomfortable? Donald Trump's a racist. I want everybody to hear me in context. I like Bruce Pearl. I respect what Bruce Pearl has said. It's inspiring. I like his boldness. But why is he allowed to be that kind of bold and free, that kind of freedom to say exactly what he thinks about Donald Trump without the ramifications? If Auburn wins the national title, they'll go to the White House. The team, the players will go to the White House. And no one's going to bat an eye. I want to give you an example of what happened to a white coach, Mike Gundy, who made the mistake of going on a private fishing trip in a T-shirt that said OAN, the conservative TV network, OAN. He's on a fishing trip and pictured. And his star running back, Chuba somebody, he's in the NFL, Chuba Hubbard or whatever, calls him out, and it's a whole Black Lives Matter controversy. And you'll say, hey, it was just the timing. This is in the middle of Black Lives Matter. Everybody was on their St. George Floyd movement, blah, blah, blah. But this man had to apologize for wearing an OAN T-shirt. He didn't even tell you what he thought about Donald Trump. He just wore the wrong T-shirt when he was out fishing. And the next thing you know, he had to have meetings with his players, and he had to issue an apology. Let's play the clip. Let me remind you of what Mike Gundy had to do.
They helped me see through their eyes how the T-shirt affected their hearts. Once I learned how that network felt about Black Lives Matter, I was disgusted and knew it was completely unacceptable to me. I want to apologize to all members of our team, former players, and their families for the pain and discomfort that has been caused over the last 2 days. Black Lives matter to me. Our players matter to me. These meetings with our team have been eye-opening and will result in positive changes for Oklahoma State football. I sincerely hope the Oklahoma State family, near and far, will accept my humble apology as we move.
That's a hostage video. They took Mike Gundy hostage. And made him say that. And yes, I know it was a different time. And you can write it all off as, man, that was, we were all crazy, BLM, COVID, whatever. And now that we're in a different time, you can say these things. Can you? I mean, can you really? Is everybody as free as Bruce Pearl? I'm not so sure. Because trust me, if Mike Tomlin came out and said, hey, I'm pro-Trump, Trump is great, and maybe he doesn't believe it. Maybe he's like every other brainwashed black man that's married to a black woman that knows that he ain't getting none if he says, hey, Trump makes some sense here. But I do know if Mike Tomlin or any of these black coaches, any of these white Christian coaches came out and were as bold as Bruce Pearl, they'd have some questions asked, and you can sit there and think that, oh, well, that was just Chuba and that one running back on his team, he did all this. No, the media did this. The media watch that TV network, it means you hate black people because you don't think Black Lives Matter. And that environment still exists to this day. And so what privilege is Bruce Pearl benefiting from, and does it need to be addressed? Can we not all play by the same rules? And I am respectful of Bruce Pearl's heritage. I get his understanding of history and why he's defensive about anti-Semitism. The man is a Jew. It makes perfect sense. I'm understanding of it. But we cannot create a different set of rules for everybody else. He gets to be free. He gets to support Donald Trump. He gets to say whatever the hell he wants. He gets to take whatever political position he wants. While the rest of you all, if you step out of line and if you're black and you don't pretend like you hate Donald Trump, and if you're white and you don't pretend like you're neutral on Donald Trump, the media is going to attack and question you. And so maybe we'll see it at the Final Four, and there'll be a lot of questions directed at Bruce Pearl and his players about, hey, don't you think Bruce Pearl's a racist for liking Donald Trump? Or maybe we won't. Maybe it'll be like, because it's been going on for a year, unabated, and there's no questions being asked. And I'm not even suggesting there should be. I want Bruce Pearl out there supporting what he believes in. And I love the fact that him and his players introduced a Bible study into their 9 a.m. meetings, and all the unity that they have at Auburn, and how he has a great team, and he's got a bunch of black players that play hard for him and love him. I just want the players to be free to love any coach of any color, of any ethnicity, that's particularly if they stand on that Bible and they stand on what they truly believe. I want the players free to publicly support those coaches and not be forced to pretend like, oh my God, my coach likes Donald Trump and I hate Donald Trump. Didn't you hear? He said, grab him he did that locker room talk. We got to pretend, we got to do the same cosplay as LeBron James and Charles Barkley and everybody else. It's, look, I'm hated. This channel's hated. What we're doing is hated. It has very little to do with me. I'm in a fight for the freedom of Christians, that we get to express our beliefs and our values as loudly and as boldly as anybody else. And for that, I will be hated. And people will try to take out of context what I just said here. And so let me just reiterate what I just said. I like Bruce Pearl. I like his boldness. I like his transparency. I like his defense of his values and the things that he finds important. I just want the same freedom for everybody. All right, we'll play tomorrow, and we will play. We'll play tomorrow, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Waiting for the countdown, coming off the breakdown, standing in line for freedom. Looking for a breakout, feeling like a standoff, nothing in life like freedom. Came in like a fighter, striking like a ladder, making all this moves for freedom. I want freedom. No negotiation, my sister, no relation. We all just wanna have freedom. Sitting on a corner, never been alone. I'm breaking my back for freedom. Blessed, we are living, get back. We are receiving, all deceiving. We all wanna be free. We want freedom. I just